is supposed to be a psychological thriller. And let's just say I was not thrilled. It's a huge pet peeve of mine when books have a tagline of a manifesto and then it's not a manifesto. Hello, my name's Ketevan. Welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you've been around here for a minute, you've probably noticed that I don't really do monthly wrap-ups or anything like that. That sort of is a general broad overview of like what I'm actually reading currently and what I actually like and don't like in terms of what I'm reading. And that's probably not a good thing, considering most people come to BookTube to see if they agree or disagree and then look for my recommendations, blah, 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 whatever. You get the deal. So all year I haven't really done that in 2023, and now it's March. So even though I've been planning this video for a while, I put off filming it because it's quite a lot of work, but I think it's going to be worth it, and I think it'll be fun. So I'm going to dive into all 200 plus books that I read in 2023 and give a very brief categorization and where they fall. So basically I have 20 different categories. Should I read them out loud right now? Yeah, why not? So I'm going to go from like worst to best. Actually, and none of them are like I really disliked it. It's more like thematic. You'll see in a second. So yeah, why is the first category. And these aren't always books that I think like are terrible. It's sometimes I'm just like, why did you write this book? Like, I don't get it. Why does this exist? Next is I don't get the hype. Like, I know they're beloved. I just do not get it. I just ... wanted more. Like, loved what it was doing. Like, enjoyed it. But like, why not more? Number 4, age not quite like fine wine. A lot of these are classics that I expected more from, and then I was just like, oh, okay, maybe they're not aging as well as I expected them to. 5, it happened one night. What is this category? Oh, it's forgetful. Sorry, I made these categories a really long time ago. But yeah, so basically, not necessarily that I read them in one night, but like I kind of forgot them in one night in the sense that like they were just very forgettable and I was just like, okay, whatever. And then we have My Book Club Made Me Do It. So books that I really only read because of my book club, mix of whether or not I like them or not, but only would have picked them up because of the book club. The 7th category is glad I read it and that's about it. Kind of like, happy I have the information, happy I had the experience, nothing else to say. Alrighty, so let's just dive right in. We're gonna go from worst to best. So why? Motherhood, Eliane Glazer. I have definitely talked about this a lot in another video. And actually while we're at it, that also includes Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. Those two, maybe, oh yeah, and a third one in this category, Ejaculate Responsibly by Gabrielle Blair. I spent I think like 45 minutes complaining about how much I hate these books. So I'll just link that video here. You can go watch it. I don't like them. That's enough said. Next up is Call the Wild by Jack London. Just, ugh. I mean, it's, yeah, I'm not going to say much about these. Swiss Family Robinson, I didn't realize before reading it that it was like just a guy that had told his sons bedtime stories, and then it was the sons that compiled it into a book. And it reads like that. It reads like a bunch of random made up stories that don't make sense and you just make them up for children because you're like, go to bed. And it reads like that. So I feel bad for the author because he really did not intend anyone to read them. So next up is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. I think there's nothing for me to say that Cindy hasn't already said, so I'll link that video down below or up above or whatever it is. She has a lot more nuanced take of this, but I was just like underwhelmed. And then We Had to Remove This Post by Hannah Bervoets. She's Dutch. I don't know how to say her name, but it's sort of like, what is the purpose of this book? I can't really tell you why because it's a huge spoiler, but it's just, if you've read it, you know what I mean. It's like, what are you trying to say? I don't get it. I Hate Men by Pauline Harmange. This is a French book, and it's like, it's funny because like I think most people hate this book because they don't like the idea of saying I hate men, and I don't have a problem with that. I do hate men. Like, men as a whole are pretty awful, right? Like, but she just makes such a bad argument that I'm like, who published this? Like, who decided like, yes, let's put this in a hardback? Anyway, Sayaka Murata's Earthlings. I know everyone like basically hates this book, and I didn't hate it. I actually was like laughing throughout most of it because I just thought it was so ridiculous. But again, it's like, why is it so ridiculous? Why was this book published? Like, I mean, I obviously get the top notes of her message, but like, wow. Who's Loving You by Sarita Domingo. This is a collection of like romance stories by women of color, and it's not, there's a couple stories I remember and like don't hate them, but most of it was just like, what are we trying to do here? Because like, it was just cheesy romance written by women of color pretending to be literary. I don't know. That's maybe a little harsh, but that's how it read to me. And then we have L'Occupation, Annie Ernaux. This is on the list twice actually because I read it in English and in French, and this is the French version, and I hated it, and it took me so long to get through, and I just was like, oh, she's crazy, I don't like her. It's Annie Ernaux, if you don't know, she's like a sort of a memoirist, and this book is about her obsession with this man that she broke up with, and he moves on, and she's like obsessed with the new woman he's with, and it's just like, you broke up with him, stop. And in English it was somehow like really bearable, but in French, I was just like, stop trying to make this sound poetic. Like, it's not. You're just unwell. So now we're moving into I Don't Get the Hype. And we have the first one is The Summer Book by Tove Jansson. Sweet little story. I do not get the obsession. It's about a daughter, a granddaughter, and a grandmother on an island. Okay, like, yeah, whatever. Catch-22, Joseph Heller, same thing. Like, okay, it's a satirical war boy book. It's just, I don't know, maybe when it came out, like, it was more of an important thing to hear, but now I'm like, yeah, we all get it. War's bad. War's stupid. War doesn't make sense. We know. Shuggie Bain by Stuart Douglas. It is well written. It's beautifully written. I, like, you know, could appreciate that, but why do this is what I don't understand. Why do people love these like just traumatic books where it's just trauma? I don't know. Maybe we're societally working through stuff. Who knows? The Perfect Nanny by Leila Slimani. This is supposed to be a psychological thriller, and let's just say I was not thrilled. It's like very boring in the sense that you already know what happened, and you think that like the thriller part is like getting into the mind of the nanny that killed the children, and you don't at all. It's just sort of like, she just did it. And you're like, okay, the end. It's very, very underwhelming. The Good Earth by Pearl S. Buck, Nobel Prize winner. You'd think it'd be it's like so great. No, it's just like a fable about this Chinese family, and it's just like, okay, like I just meh. The Lover, Marguerite Duras. Again, like, this is a white woman writing about Asian people. And it's just like, okay. And very underwhelming, except this one has like a white protagonist, and she lives in China, and she basically, like, you know, she has a sugar daddy who's Chinese, and the dynamics that you know fall from that, and it is like interesting, but also it's like I just don't get why people love the book too at the same time. So yeah. The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler. This one's like one of those, you know, like thriller noir classics, and I just still do not, I also do not get it. It's super dated. So I mean, yeah, of course it's a classic for the genre, but I also just don't get the genre, so maybe that's the reason. The Road by Cormac McCarthy. Wow, I was shocked at how bad this book was. Like, zero character development, super misogynistic. I was just like, I've been hearing for literal decades about how great this book is, and to read it, I was just like, okay, great. Same with The Martian by Andy Weir. Same thing, like, no character development, no depth, and I get that it was like self-published, it was his first book, and he like almost did it on purpose so he could get all the technical stuff right. I know all that. I know, and I still think it's a really bad book. So yeah, it is what it is. Alrighty, and next up we have, I just wanted more. So we have The Private Life of Trees by Alejandro Zambra. This is, I think, I thought I read both of these. Oh, I did. It's just separate. The Private Life of Trees and Bonsai. It's sort of like they're not really sequels or anything, like, but they do go together and they're like have overlapping characters and they're both good, but it's just kind of, it felt like a spec you would send to a publisher, and then instead of like having the author write the whole novel, they're like, let's just publish the spec. Like, okay. And yeah, so it was good, but like wanted more. Abolish the Family by Sophie Lewis. I unfortunately picked this for a book club book and before reading it, and I was disappointed in the sense that it wasn't the book that was best for that discussion, but I do like it. It's not, the tagline is a manifesto. If you watch that Feminist Books I Hate video, you'll see that like it's a huge pet peeve of mine when books have a tagline of a manifesto and then it's not a manifesto. Like, that's not just a buzzword you can just slap on a book cover. Basically every page would just be like, I don't want to tell you how to do these changes because it's a societal shift that has to happen and I can't tell you what to do or what's best, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, obviously it hasn't happened yet, but you could put out some ideas. And she did, in the sense that it was a history of this movement, but yeah, wanted more. Blonde Roots, Bernadine Evaristo. This one was the book where I think I finally decided I do not like, what is it called? Alternative fiction, because I just am like, I need more from alternative fiction and it's just not giving it to me. So yeah. Oh my God, we're like 25 books in. This needs to like get going. Alrighty, Jane and Prudence by Barbara Pym. Nice little like post-war novel. I wanted more from it. It was just like the Paul Kalanithi. Not sure how to say his last name, but When Breath Becomes Air, he's the doctor that ended up with terminal cancer and wrote this book kind of like as he was dying. I don't know. There's no like polite way to say anything else. I wanted more, but he died. So like I can't really like you can't really like critique that, obviously. But I feel like if he had lived maybe an extra 6 months, like well enough to write, it would have been so much better. Packing for Mars, Mary Roach. Same thing, like it was lots of, it's pop, nonfiction about space. Like it was just full of fun little facts and stories, but it almost had nothing to do with Mars. And that was like a little bit disappointing for me. Like, but I kind of thought there would be a bit more of like, say, the Martian in this book, but alas. Pegasus by Richard Laurent and Sandrine Rigaud. This one, it's my fault that I want more, because when I read the back cover and like the description, I realized like, oh, it's exactly what it said it was gonna be. I just bought it thinking it would be something else, so this one's my fault. But Pegasus is, if you haven't followed it in the news, it's the software that like allows governments to spy on you like in any way. Like they can turn on your camera and like watch you or record you whenever they want. They don't need any sort of warrant or anything like that. It's like very, very scary software to exist in the world. And this is the book by the journalists who broke that story. So I thought it would be more, like I wanted it to be more about the actual software and like what has happened since the breaking of the story and things like that. But really it's just a story of how they broke the story, which is interesting. But also like, I'm not a journalist and I don't really care how journalists break stories in the sense that I would read a whole book about it. So I learned more about the software and like exactly what it does, but I don't think I would have learned much more had I not just read like maybe 10 articles out in the media about it. So in that sense, I think it was a bit of a waste of my time, but that's just because of what I was looking for. Otherwise, it was a really great book. And then we have, next section, Aged Not Quite Like Fine Wine. So these are all, let's see, all of them I broadly enjoyed. I enjoyed all of them. So they're like older books that just like didn't age perfectly. That's all. So first one is Autobiography of Malcolm X by Alex Healy, or As Told To by Alex Healy. And it's great. Like Malcolm X is great, but like, he was a pretty like misogynistic dude, right? So it's not like he's like the perfect leader anymore, right? But that's fine. Like movements have moved on. Virginie Despentes, King Kong Theory, same thing. I think I've discussed this on the channel before. Like, it's a really interesting, like, philosophical argument she puts forth, but, like, she is, like, a wealthy, white sex worker who's discussing this, and she calls herself ugly, but she's, like, objectively beautiful. I mean, according to Western standards, because there's no objective, right? But, like, she just seems to think she's a lot more oppressed than she is, and I'm not saying she's not oppressed, it's just that, like, her word is not the end all be all on this subject, and she kind of acts like it is, or writes like it is, I suppose. But I still really enjoyed it. So yeah, I'll stop saying that because I really enjoyed all of them. 1984, George Orwell. This is probably the one I enjoyed the least, but it's still a great book. Obviously, it's a classic. I enjoyed it when I read it the first time, but I reread it because I read Julia, which is like a retelling from Julia's perspective. It's like a good thing I read it when I was young, because if I read it just now, I've been like, what the heck? Why do people love this book? Like, it's just, I don't know. It just feels very simplistic to me at this stage in my life. Wait, so why is it problematic? Oh, the misogyny. All About Love, New Visions by Bell Hooks. This one's more personal because, like, I mean, I obviously agree with most of the things Bell Hooks says, but she clearly had like a bad experience with non-monogamy, or had heard of bad experiences with non-monogamy, and she like is just, she thinks it's like something that men force women to do, and like, no. But whatever. The Bean Trees by Barbara Kingsolver. I actually buddy read this with Anya, and I enjoyed the buddy read with her. It was great. It's basically like a novelization justification of why we should all ignore the Indian Child Welfare Act, which is a law in the United States that basically prevents white people from stealing Native children and adopting them, because that's what was happening, obviously, for like decades, if not hundreds of years. And basically this, I mean, she's not white, right? She's like, you know, got her like Cherokee princess like background of like, but she's not connected at all to a tribe or any sort of indigenous culture. She lives as a white person, and she just finds this toddler, and instead of like reporting it to the authorities, she just like decides to keep the toddler and raise the toddler. Anyway, it just really, I was like, wow, this is super problematic, and like, it's really not okay to depict this kind of like child theft. Yeah, we won't get into more of that, but yeah, I found it extremely problematic. Men Explain Things to Me by Rebecca Solnit. This was good, and I don't mean to say it didn't age well because there was anything problematic about it. It's just like a lot of the essays in it are very topical to when this like collection was published. So it's like basically a collection of essays that she published in like news or magazines or websites, and it's like about very like interesting topics, but I'm like, I already read about these topics in the news. Like, I remember this, so like I don't need to read a book about it, you know, because it's just the same articles reprinted. So I think it'll sort of like maybe not be that interesting in the future, except for of course the titled essay. Neville Shute, A Town Like Alice. This is, it's a really nice story. It's really cute. It's like a fantastic adventure love story, but it's basically, again, just a story justifying white colonization of Australia and saying like, look how hard these white people work to like make the land usable. Like, oh my gosh, what is like, next up, or last in this category, My People the Sioux by Luther Standing Bear. This is a native classic, indigenous classic in North America. It is fantastic. It is basically the first book written by a Native American person. And it's a great book. Like, it's really fantastic. It's his autobiography, and he really just goes through his childhood up until his old age. Because of when it was published and because of what he was doing with the purpose of the book was to get white people to accept indigenous people as valid. It's written in a way that I don't think is very helpful for many people to read, so that the perspective is like, you know, we can work hard. We're not lazy. You know, we're not all thieves. We're not all like, you know, like those native people that I'm going to tell you about. We can be different. And so like, I get why it was written that way. Obviously it had to be written that way for that time period. But in terms of like reading it nowadays, it's definitely more of like a historical document than like what I would consider good activism. So next category, It Happened One Night. So these are the forgettable ones. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, The Body Politic. This is like an excerpt of one of his larger works. It's like literally so forgettable, I don't remember even what the larger work is. But it's basically just like political theory. I thought it'd be fun to reread. It wasn't. Jean-Dominique Bobby, Diving Bell and the Butterfly. Again, like the concept is so cool. This guy, he has a locked-in syndrome, so he can only blink, can't move anything else. And so he blinks out the book. Like, whoa. So he blinks like, you know, 1 time for the letter A, 2 times for the letter B, and like letter by letter wrote the book while he had locked-in syndrome. Amazing feat. Wanted to read the book just because of that, but the book itself, kind of forgettable, unfortunately. Colson Whitehead's Underground Railroad. Depending on which was read first, this is the book that might have made me not like alternate fiction, because I liked his other book, and this one I was like, oh, I don't like this as much, so, and it's just so forgettable. I'm like, okay, there's an underground railroad, and it's real. Other than that, I don't remember a single thing about this book. Very forgettable for me. Karen Blixen's Out of Africa and Shadows on the Grass. Again, like, I finished it because I wanted to have, like, read the whole thing and know what the whole story was about. But so forgettable, the details. I'm like, yep, I get it. Like, you feel bad for yourself. Yep, it's hard running a plantation. Boo-hoo to you. Like, that was the vibe, and I just can't remember the details. Here be icebergs. Katya Adai. Not sure how to pronounce her last name, but this was very unforgettable. I don't remember where it's from, but it's by Charco Press, so it's from somewhere in Latin America, and it's a collection of short stories. And as I was reading them, I was like, huh, these are not making any sort of impact on me at all. And I was like curious why, and I just, yeah, they're like so forgettable. I can't remember a single story from that collection, and normally that never happens to me. So it's been like less than 9 months, and that's like really says a lot. South Africa, this was just a little like tourist book that I read for the French, about South Africa, that they translated everything into French. And I mean, I already knew pretty much everything it had to say about South Africa, so it was very forgettable in that sense. Britt Bennett, The Vanishing Half. This is supposed to be like a retelling of sort of like Passing, but like with a trans twist, and I just think it wasn't done very well, and it just was not disappointing. It was just kind of like, oh, okay, so it's like a retelling of Passing by Nella Larson, and it's not done as well as Nella Larson's. Okay, like that's basically it for me. American Primitive by Mary Oliver. Again, like I'm just like, I thought it would be like a really like enriching nature poetry sort of experience. Nah, just don't remember anything. I don't get it. And then Nina Mingia Powell's The Small Bodies of Water. This is like sort of an essay collection, I think. I listened to the audio, so I'm not sure exactly how it's formatted on the page, but it's like a series of essays about her life and her relationship with water. And she's, I don't remember which Asian country of descent, but she lives in Australia, and she bops around different places in the world and discusses her relationship to water, or her life through water, metaphors around the world. And I just don't remember any of it. And like, as I was reading it, I was like, I'm not gonna remember any of this. Like I was bored basically, which is unfortunate, but yeah. And then we've got 2 Bill Brysons. I think pretty much all Bill Brysons are pretty forgettable. I mean, there's so many like very specific details in Bill Bryson books that like you can't remember them all. First one was The Life and Times of the Thunderbolt Kid. This was about his childhood. He has several books about his childhood, and I think I've read 2 of them, and I couldn't tell you the difference between the 2 of them. So next one was Made in America, and this one was about like linguistics, I think, in America. See, I'm not even sure of like the subject, and it's pretty clear from the title, Made in America. It must be about the language. You see what I'm saying? Oh my gosh, we're literally like 1/4 of the way through. This is so bad. This is gonna be like a 2-hour video. Okay, we gotta go quick. We gotta go quick. My book club made me do it. Yeah, actually this can be a very quick category because literally I'll just give it a thumbs up or thumbs down because like I didn't choose it for any reason. I didn't have any expectations. So yeah. Concerning My Daughter, Haejin Kim. Oh man, this is not saving time. Thumbs up, yeah, thumbs up. Kyung Suk Shin, Violets. Yeah, thumbs up. Big Swiss by Jennifer Began. Thumbs down. Mitu Sanyal, Identity. Thumbs up, thumbs up. Trespasses by Louise Kennedy. Middle ground. Travis Albanza, None of the Above. Ooh, I gotta give it a thumbs down, not because of the content, but because it was so repetitive, and I just cannot stand that in nonfiction. But the content was really good. It's just the style that bothered me. 7 Moons of Molly Almeida, thumbs up. Forbidden Notebook by Alba de Cespedes, thumbs down. Category number 7, glad I read it and that's about it. Jean Genet's The Criminal Child. It's originally supposed to be a a radio broadcast, and then they didn't let him do it because they were too offended by it, so he ended up just publishing it. It's basically about how we criminalize children and what that does to then the adult they become. It's pretty interesting. Richard D'Souza's Love, a very short introduction. I love that series. But again, it's like you just read those. It's from Oxford World Press. You just read them for information. It's not like you're going to have some sort of transcendental experience. Louise Erdrich, Plague of Doves. I know this is part of a larger series, so maybe that's why I wasn't like drawn in as much, but I'm glad I read it. Elizabeth Colomba and Orly Levy, Queenie. It's a comic book about this woman who was like the biggest gangster in New York City before the mafia moved in. Very cool. But again, like, just glad I read it. At Night, All Blood is Black by David Diop. Again, war books, they're never going to be like a huge impression on me, but it was very good. Secret History of Wonder Woman, Jill Lepore. Wild ride. Very glad I read it though, because I am a big fan of Wonder Woman, so it was really good to have that background.